Will? This one? Manager, government, city manager. You hold it over. Hold it over already. How many times can you hold it over?
Can we go ahead and start? Okay. It is now 6 o'clock, and we're going to go ahead and start the Code Revisions, Appeals, and Negotiations Committee. Can I have the roll call, please, Madam Clerk? There's Stu. Here it is.
Alderman Hayes.
Present.
Alderman Kirkwood.
Present.
Alderman Moiseo.
Here.
Alderman Seeger.
Present.
Mayor Taylor.
Present. Okay, can I have a motion to approve the minutes from the November 21st, 2022 Code Revisions, Appeals, and Negotiations Committee meeting? Alderman Kirkwood, second. Alderman Seeger. All those in favor?
Aye.
There being no new business, it's just old business. We can, if you want to talk about it, we can. Otherwise, we can just open it to public comment and then adjourn. Any comments?
I thought we were going to put the nonpartisan. I know it was in the committee of the whole. Where are we?
It's on the committee of the whole. That's the next meeting.
Oh, yeah, good enough. Now, I mean, can we talk about this? We have to deal with that. Either yes or no.
Yeah.
Yeah. So,
I'm just being hypothetical. Say we vote to put that on the ballot. A statute can only have 3 referendum questions, correct?
yes,
Then where do these, how would that flush these 3 out?
only 2 of them could appear.
Holy. What was that, Stu?
We had to make a decision on which 2 would go.
Well, it would be a decision, you would have to assume whether this one passed, and then you would, you would have to do the other ones in order, basically. The other 3, you couldn't put 2 and 3 on the ballot without putting 1, because they're dependent on each other.
Yeah, because I thought B and C were tied to A.
They are, but we're not talking about, oh, yeah, oh, no, we are talking about that in this meeting. Yes, we are, yes, yeah.
So if the nonpartisan is voted to go to the agenda, you can't put any of these 3 on there, or you could still put 2 of them?
When you say on the agenda, what do you mean?
Excuse me, I'm sorry, let me get my words right, on the ballot, I'm sorry.
Yeah. So theoretically, if a ballot slot was taken up by the nonpartisan referendum question, there would be 2 referenda slots still available. For these referenda questions that are being discussed in this committee, only the first and the second could go on, which would be the shall the City of Waukegan adopt the managerial form of government,
Right.
and shall it retain wards? And then the question of shall it continue to elect only 1 alderman per ward would have to be left to a future election. Now, I would say that any changes that were made to the election of aldermen in the by referendum at the consolidated election in April would not take effect until 2027. So conceivably, the question of how many aldermen per ward could be taken up at some time before 2027.
I'm just trying to get the timeline so that people understand.
Yeah.
No, it's not simple.
This would be, whether it's you're for, against, up, down, this would be a tremendous amount of change all at once, and the timeline is not all the same.
Well, your alderman wouldn't really change because, yeah, yeah,
If we go to put the managerial thing on it, that would change immediately.
right. But your,
Other ones
right.
would not, the nonpartisan would
27?
not. That would
The
be-
nonpartisans would not, and neither would these. because your alderman would already be elected by the time this went onto the ballot.
If.
Or not on the ballot,
Now,
but
I'm going to add one wrinkle here. If the city council chose to put the switch to nonpartisan elections as a referendum on the ballot for the April consolidated election, that would take effect at the next consolidated election. That is, it doesn't matter about wards. That would actually affect the mayoral election.
Correct.
Now, having wards or not having wards does not affect the mayor, clerk, treasurer elections.
So that'd be 2024, right?
2027.
No,
20.
2025
Yeah,
would be the next mayoral election.
right.
Again, this is, I hate to be confusing,
Okay,
but I want.
so Pat's confused, so let me explain this. So the nonpartisan election would not affect this 23 election. It would affect the mayoral election in 2025. As far as the, if the voters voted to have a management form of government, that would take effect in 2023, but the alderman would not change until 2027. So if you decided that, okay, we didn't put item 3 on the ballot, you could do it during the mayoral race, that you could decide to do that. So there's other places along the way that you can fix that before the aldermen get reelected in 2027. So even if it's not on the ballot, there's still plenty of time to change that before the alderman would be reelected the next time.
All right, thank you.
I mean, so it's, if you put A and B and the nonpartisan on there, okay, whatever the outcome, you have to address C at some time?
Unless in 2027 you want to build a bigger dais.
Yeah,
You have to address, okay. I
you
get
have
it.
to address
So by
it.
default, it would go back to 2.
Yes.
If you have to, okay.
Yeah.
And like I said, you would actually have another major election in there before the alderman,
I'm just
yeah.
trying to set the timeline and the parameters and some of the,
Mayor, can I say something?
Sure.
Even though I'm not on this committee. I don't know if everyone's up here is aware, but there are citizens out in the community circulating petitions to put this on the ballot. And if they get 3,000 or so signatures, only A is going on the ballot. So unless we vote to put A, B, and C on the ballot, only A is going to go on by default because these petitions are being, if they're successful, let's say, only A is going on the ballot. So if we want to control what B and C say, we need to do that up here. We can't ignore these petitions that are out there being circulated, and if they get enough signatures that are legal, they can put this on the ballot, and they are only circulating petitions for item A.
and if they're successful in that, and they get done, so that would go on the ballot, irregardless of the nonpartisan, that doesn't make a difference. You get-
No, the nonpartisan would,
I know,
yeah.
I know that. If the citizens get that and they get A, you would still have to deal with B and C at a later time, correct?
You could, yeah.
Or not?
You wouldn't have to.
You wouldn't have to. I mean, if you
You'll go
don't,
down to by default, you'll go down to 6 aldermen elected at large throughout the city.
If they get it, if it goes to a managerial form from
Yep.
the citizens.
Yep.
if the citizens do, yeah.
Yes.
Or you could, in the meantime, as alderman, you have a chance to bring that back at another time and do B and C. You could do it again as part of the mayoral election.
That wouldn't take, obviously, they got the, if the citizens got it on the ballot and it took effect, you wouldn't go to 6 aldermen.
No, that wouldn't happen until the
That
next
wouldn't
alderman.
happen until 2027.
27?
I have a comment. I think, to Alderman Florian's point, but also kind of what's being discussed, is to try to control the narrative. We can make a decision up here that allows us to set the timeline for what is to come. Now, there was a whole host, as I've talked about in other meetings, of approvals or at least, positive reaction to a potential city manager form of government, but you guys wanted it on the ballot, which I understand, and that's hopefully what we're going to do. But when the other two questions came out, it seemed like a lot of people hit the brakes because they said this might be too confusing, which I stand by my comments, which I trust the people going to the voting booth that they're able to read and discern what this says and make an informed decision. But it sounds like it gives us the opportunity to potentially remove any confusion and maybe just only put A on the ballot this time around. So it's like, that's it. You're only faced with the city manager question. So there's no confusion about the other two items that we could then potentially address down the road, or we would address down the road.
Now, that might be more appetizing, is that you just put the city manager, then you have to deal with the aldermanic thing at some other issue, at some other time.
Yeah, it just seems like, it seems like
I
if,
get your point, I
yeah.
get, Tom, I get your point, and I appreciate that, but this, you know, all of that at one time might be, I don't, you know, it's just,
Confusing.
because the B and C, whether it's on this ballot, on the new, this one ballot coming up, or a next one, it's not gonna take effect till 2027 anyway, correct?
Right.
Yeah, I mean, it would be so far down the road that.
You know, maybe that, I don't know.
Alderman Newsom wants to talk.
I have a question for Stu. I thought that putting this on the referendum, you had to have the other two questions attached according to the state statute.
You do not have to have them attached. They have to be in the form that I presented, that exact language. And what has been kind of pointed out through Alderman Moisio's questions are what happens if you don't consider those. And the answer is that the form of elections basically is set to switch in 4 years, and it's kind of hanging out there, that unless you deal with it before 2027, that at that election, you will have an elimination of wards and only 6 aldermen. So if you want to ensure that everything stays the same, and this is all kind of said and dealt with all at once, you would put all 3 on the ballot on one election. It could be, but you can kind of leave that out to be dealt with.
I don't think it's too difficult to tell people you want to vote yes on all 3 things. I mean, that's what we all want, right? So if you're out there telling them we want a city manager, vote yes on that, you need to vote yes on the other 2 things. I mean, it's not, one yes is not that much easier than 3 yeses, in my opinion.
I mean, theoretically, Stu, if somebody, let's say we put all 3 on the ballot, and number 1 is no, and the other 2 are yes, then there's no change at all, right?
Nothing yet. Sorry.
Just trying to go through all this.
No, and I'm happy to do this. And I actually did post a flow chart up on board docs that I had been asked to prepare.
Yes.
Yes.
I'm just making sure.
Yeah. So I can talk through that actually if you'd like. So the first scenario is that these 3 questions go on the ballot, and someone votes yes on all, or not sufficient number of voters vote yes on all 3. Then what would happen would be the process that I described in my presentation a few weeks ago, in which basically the next day we would certify we would certify the results, and we would then staff and Corporation Council would prepare an ordinance that would officially switch the city, to a managerial form of government. The position would need to be created by ordinance and a salary established for that, and the recruiting process would begin. As for the elections, nothing would change with regard to that. There would still be wards, and there would still be 1 alderman per ward. If the first question is voted no, then the second 2 questions, the second 2 questions are not considered. Nothing changes. We remain in Article 3.1, mayor, council, form of government, and if the city wants to have a manager-type position, they can adopt a city administrator by ordinance. The other permutations are the ones that Alderman Moiseo is referring to now. So you vote for, citizens vote for yes on one, to adopt a manager, but no to retain wards. That means that we then default to the Article 5 form of elections, which is what we've been talking about here, where all the aldermen are elected at large. There are 6 of them, and they can come from anywhere in the city. That would be a very big change for the city of Waukegan. The final kind of permutation is that there is yes on the managerial form of government, yes to retain wards, but no to only having 1 alderman per ward, and that's when we turn the clock back to 1979, and we have 18 aldermen, 2 per ward, and then if by that time we've hit 90,000 people, we might even have 20 up on the dais eventually, and we might have to borrow the county's chambers to hold our meetings.
Very good explanation, thank you.
Using this whole,
One more, let's belabor this. All 3 are yes. So, unanimous. Council would be in charge of hiring them, setting the contract, deciding what the salary. The mayor basically becomes, doesn't have a vote, doesn't have the ability to appoint department heads, basically becomes statutory.
Under Article 5, the mayor can vote.
Oh, that one, okay.
Yes.
Excuse me, then I was-
Yeah,
The
so-
mayor could vote, but they don't know. Department heads, they don't set the agenda, obviously, the mayor has some influence, but I mean, they basically become.
It depends on how you, yeah, yes, yeah. The mayor's power, a lot of the mayor's powers are then delegated to,
By statute.
by
law.
statute, yes, yeah.
But quite a bit of that power comes back to city council, which starts with the approval of the city manager. And then the city manager answers to the city council, and it gives us the ability to do a lot of the things that the mayor was doing. And I also think that, to some extent, as a council, we could set the scope of the mayor's roles and responsibilities and have those discussions as well. So I think figurehead's a little strong, but certainly a reduction in roles and responsibilities, I would agree with. But I still think it's an important and critical role within the city. But the point a lot of us have made kind of all along is that it puts a lot of authority back with the city council, which
The city council still, in either form, in my opinion, still has the power. The city council has the power now. If we got a city manager, we still have the power then, too, because any city manager worth himself is not gonna piss off 5 aldermen. Because I need to be done. You know, so at the end of the day, in our democracy, it's who's got the vote. At any level of, whether it's a school board, a park.
But votes on what, Greg? Who puts the stuff on the agenda now? Do you put the stuff on the agenda? I don't either.
But you're missing my point. At the end of the day, the elected people, whoever has the number of votes, that's who they decide to think. So, I mean, the best way to think of, in my analogy, would be if you have a city manager form of government, it's like a school district with a superintendent. That person is in charge, and they answer to the school board, and the school board governs from that. But the superintendent, which the city manager would be, is basically the CEO.
Yeah,
And
and
I think an important-
she would be a figurehead too, right? Because she's the superintendent.
No, the superintendent would be like the city manager, not a figurehead. There's no figurehead. He's the president, but he's both. Different. The mayor would be, I get it.
I mean, and those duties of the mayor would have to be assigned and determined by the council.
Well, it's by statute, too.
Yeah, yeah.
It's by statute, correct?
But, go ahead, Stu.
Under home rule, you'd have certain flexibility, but under the traditional manager form of government, the management of staff is delegated to the city manager, yes. Yeah.
Okay, any,
Sorry, can you repeat that one more time, please? Say that once again.
Under an Article 5 managerial form of government, the appointment of department heads and the management of staff is the responsibility of the city manager. The city manager basically is in charge of all administrative and kind of daily functions of the city, and the decision whether to hire, fire, or direct the city manager lies with the city council as a whole.
I hate to get in the weeds, but I feel like I want to cover all the basics. How hard is it for the city council to fire a city manager?
It's by a majority vote. Now, there are contractual issues because,
Either buying them out or firing them for cause.
yeah, basically, I mean, usually a city manager who is coming in probably from another community, probably is coming in with, very strong credentials and a lot of experience, is going to want some recourse, basically to protect themselves from
Of course. I mean,
political firings, but yeah.
Any school
Yeah.
superintendent, any manager is going to come in and want a not one-year contract. I mean,
Right.
let's not be silly.
Yeah,
The
but
other thing is, would then the positions of officers of the city, that manager would have carte blanche to hire the police, the fire, the public works, the building commissioner, and CDBG with no input from the council, or would the council have to consent and approve?
police is a little bit different. It's handled a little bit differently. I believe that still is retained with the consent of the council. I'd have to look at that. But all their department heads, yes, that would be basically within their
The
discretion.
manager could come in, this happens in April, could come in and fire all the department heads, and there's nothing the city council could do.
Probably approve some labor lawsuits if that happened.
I'm just getting in the weeds here. These are all questions that I've been.
Yeah, but the city.
I don't even think that that's realistic.
I don't-
It's
I don't
a
either.
draconian.
I don't either, but I'm just, like I said, I'm just getting in the weeds. don't think
I mean,
it's realistic either.
all the powers that a new mayor could have would be the same powers with regard to hiring and firing would be then vested into a city manager.
One important point I'd like to draw, if I could, Mayor, sorry, is when you talk about a superintendent, that's a prime example of hiring an expert to come in and do a job. A superintendent has credentials, has had not only the academic credentials, but has also been in that role or a similar role for years, if not decades. So it's the same thing we're talking about a city manager. You hire for the expertise, you fill the role with an expert who's trained to do this kind of stuff. It's the same thing with fire, IT, risk management. I mean, any department within the city we're hiring somebody who has experience, professional experience in municipal management. We are hiring for the expertise. So I think that's an important point, because none of us are experts on municipal management. And I think bringing in somebody who has those credentials, who will advise us. I'm not aware of any situation, and I would love it if somebody told me of a city manager who walks in and just like scorched earth, wipes out every department head and completely revamps the city. That's not what's going to happen. And they're going to come to us, and the city manager, I called the city manager and spoke with her, and it is all about informing the council. It is all about making a presentation and giving the council the information that it needs to make an informed decision. So it's all about the relationship between the city manager and the council. So
If the council objects, then what?
the council, we can object, we can choose not to vote on something, we can,
Same as you do now.
yeah. All the decisions we're making now still come before us.
Council loses no power.
Yeah. Council. Yeah, I agree, because the city manager, we have the authority to fire the city manager.
Yeah, I mean, I
Don't have the authority to
I don't
fire
want to, I don't want to lean in any which way, but if you're talking about the balance of power, the mayor right now has the ability to terminate department heads without any input
Anybody, yeah.
from the city council. And if the city council disagreed, the city council cannot remove the mayor. If a city manager wanted to fire all the department heads, the city council could fire the city manager.
Is that with cause, or that's a buyout?
Well, Whether, that would be negotiated, and that, you know, you'd probably have to consider issues like that, but.
That's not what we're going to see happen, because a city manager's.
So either, but
Yeah.
like I said, I'm just giving it all the scenarios. I
Yeah,
think that's.
I appreciate that, because I learned something up here through the conversation, so I think it's really helpful. So I just want to make sure that I understand that we can take each of these three individually and entertain which,
I think that's an important point.
hopefully all three. I'm in favor of all three, but we can choose which one to go on the ballot. So if there's aldermen that are concerned about any sort of confusion on the ballot as it relates to the ward system or the number of aldermen, we can take up city manager now on this coming up ballot, and then table the other two for future ballot.
You just table it, you just vote them down, and then they'd have to come up before the 2027 election, or you get stuck with the quagmire going backwards.
I think it eliminates a lot of the debate that we've been having about the ward system and the number of aldermen, and allows us just to focus on the issue that's most germane, and that's the city manager role. So if we can do that, I think it maybe shifts the conversation enough that we get back to the point where several months ago, everyone was in favor of putting it on the ballot, and then just letting the voters decide, right? Because we're not voting up or down on whether to appoint a city manager. We're just giving our constituents the ability to make that decision for us. And that's where I land on this, is I can't think of anything more important in all of government, but certainly local government, to give our neighbors the right to make a decision.
Good point.
I'll just give you my position is when I was out there campaigning, one of the biggest things people told me was they wanted a city manager. I support a city manager. I have come in, I've talked to each one of you, I've tried to have the professional organizations talk to you. I have said to you I would put it as a referendum. It wasn't, I gave you guys a chance to try it before we put it on a referendum. So I've tried everything that I can possibly do. You know, again, the professional organization will come in next week to answer questions here on the council floor. But at some point, it's time to get off the pot and make a decision about this. And, you know, it's not going to be tonight, but it's coming to that point. So, you know, like I said, it's just what it is. Is there any other public comment at this time on this? Okay. Can I have a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Yeah, oh, and just to clarify, this committee had previously taken a vote that this item would be placed on committee basically every 2 weeks until December 19th, when it's going to appear on the city council agenda. So we're not going to have a code revisions committee in 2 weeks. This is just going to go onto the agenda for a vote, for an up or down vote on each of these three resolutions.
Can I have a first for a motion to adjourn? Can I have a second? Second, Alderman Kirkwood.
You can call the roll if you want.
Roll call, please.
Alderman Hayes.
Aye.
Alderman Kirkwood. Alderman Moiseo.
Aye.
Alderman Seeger.
Aye.
Mayor Taylor.
Aye. Does anybody need a break before we go on to the committee of the whole? No? Let's just go to